So I didn't have to eliminate everything completely, but I just had to be mindful of where's my histamine bucket today? How many oxalates am I eating? And it just went from there.
The information provided on the Autoimmune Hour and Understanding Autoimmune and the websites understandingautoimmune.com plus social media is for educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and its websites and other media outlets is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com and, of course, UnderstandingAutoimmune.com. And it's so wonderful to be with you here today. I'm in a new place. Can't really tell from the background, but you probably see the sun coming in there from the side and showing some sunshine. And I've got a really fascinating topic today. It's another Courage Club conversation, someone who has turned her life around and become an amazing star. And so let me give you her bio, and then we'll jump right into talking to Kim Talbot. Since moving to Canada from the UK in 2000, she has found her passion in hiking, mountaineering, and yoga, and fell in love with the great Canadian outdoors. And after graduating, she spent most of her career in scientific research, with over 20 years as a researcher in diabetes and blood coagulation. It's not easy to say.
No.
I could go on and on, but let's jump ahead to where she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, POTS, hormone imbalances, moderate sleep apnea, myofascial pain syndrome, as well as parasites and much more. She'd hit rock bottom, she says. She was barely able to walk, and it was overwhelming fatigue and exhaustion. And I think some of us can put our hand up and knowing exactly what that feels like. And her doctors were unable to help her. I think we can double put our hands up on that one, and told her that she wouldn't recover, just to get used to it. How many of us have heard that? She has an amazing success story, and from the survivor to thriver story, because now on her healing journey, she has taken all that she's learned and added spiritual growth and self-compassion in many years of her own research. As I mentioned before, she was a researcher, so she put all of that knowledge to good use to find her foundations in health. And now she helps others. Welcome, Kim. Thanks for being on the show.
Hi, Sharon. Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Kim, after reading that bio, I was really nodding my head along like, wow, this is a story I hear a lot of times. I'm just curious, tell us a little bit about your story, and where did the courage to say, I'm not going to accept what the doctor said, that's not going to be my fate? Where did that come from?
I'm not too sure. Maybe it was just within me my whole life, but I'm not really, I've listened to some of the Courage Clubs and the A-type personalities, and I'm not really that kind of person. I've always been kind of quiet, a little bit introverted, always did what I was told. But I did have this little streak where I would be a little bit naughty on occasion. So maybe that was within me. I did really hit rock bottom, and I was really desperate. And I did get to a place where I kind of accepted, this is it. I remember going out with my husband to the nearest toy shop, and we bought a bunch of games to play, like Connect 4 and Scrabble. And I was like, okay, this is my life from now on. I think somehow that acceptance helped me get better. Like I stopped fighting it, but also I just had this inner tenacity or determination where I just didn't give up. I might have accepted where I was, but I just was not going to give up, no matter what the doctor said. They told me to stop researching and that I was making myself sick by all the research I was doing.
I'm not sure about that. You're already plenty sick.
Yeah.
I
know, it's so ludicrous. And I was told I was a hypochondriac, but in a fancier word that I can't remember. And I was just like, well, I don't agree. And of course, probably a lot of your listeners, they tried to put me on antidepressants. They may have had the same thing happen to them. And I was like, I'm not depressed. I'm not a depressive person. Like, I'm a very happy person usually. I'm just unhappy now because of all the physical illness that I have. And I really didn't want to go on antidepressants because I knew the side effects. So I did refuse them. And luckily, my doctor, although limited in how she could help me, she did agree a little bit in that she didn't want to force me to take them because, of course, I was on medical leave at this point. And if I didn't comply with the doctor's wishes, they could take my funding away for that. It was a little bit scary that maybe I would be forced to take medications that I didn't feel were right for me. But luckily, she didn't. And she did prescribe some medications that actually did help. The doctors, although didn't help me to get better, they did help me with symptoms with some of the medications I took at the time.
For me too, I was acutely sick by the time I got the diagnosis. And I do feel that a lot of the intervention stabilized the progression because it had been going downhill rather quickly. So
Yeah.
we reached a landing point, a stabilization, and then stayed on the medications a little while to make sure it was stable. And then I was able from that launching point to work on regaining my health.
Yeah, similar. Actually, my doctor gave me a medication called dextroamphetamine, which is, as it sounds, it's an amphetamine to give me more energy. And it sounds a bit crazy, maybe, but it really helped me get back to work at the time. And the other medications came from other sources, but then my doctor continued to prescribe them. I'd gone to a naturopathic doctor, got prescribed progesterone. Even though my hormone levels for progesterone didn't look abnormal, I had the symptoms of estrogen dominance. So she prescribed me the progesterone, and then my doctor agreed to continue. And then I was lucky enough at the time when I was sick, they just opened this incredible clinic in Vancouver called the Center for Complex Chronic Diseases. And I went on the wait list. I had a friend who found out about it. I got on that wait list, and within a year, I was seeing the doctors there, and all the doctors there were incredible. So if anyone's in Vancouver, Canada area, this is an amazing clinic if you can get in. I think the wait list now is like crazy long, but the doctors there, they understand. They got me on low dose naltrexone, which is like a common sort of anti-inflammatory. And I don't know how much that one helped. That was another one that I took. And I still take the low dose naltrexone and the progesterone. The progesterone I know still helps. The low dose naltrexone, I'm not sure. Maybe one day I'll wean off it. It doesn't have any side effects as far as I can tell. So I'm happy to take it.
It's important to have doctors who are willing to walk with you on this process instead of dominate the process. I think
Yeah.
our bodies are all so different. I've heard many people talk about a variety of pharmaceuticals all the way to herbal supplements that help their specific symptoms. And to me, the one thing I've learned since starting the show over a decade ago, how individualized each of our journeys are. And
Yeah.
with all of your background in scientific research and then getting hit with these multiple symptoms, and then as your story progressed about, for me, what I call my terminology, you were gaslit royally a lot of times.
Definitely.
Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about when you were given these comments or things and how you were able to just say, hey, not me. One of the things in our conversations when I'm getting to know you, Kim, was how strong you are in who you are and saying, hey, maybe for somebody else, but that's not who I am.
When you're going through the motions of being chronically ill, it really affects you mentally. And actually, I wasn't this strong at the time, although that inner light was still there, of course, because I did do my own thing in the end. And maybe having the research background really helped me. But, you know, when I saw a doctor, like one doctor, before I even got diagnosed, I was like, I'm just so tired all the time. I can't function. And her response to that was, well, we're all tired. And
That's helpful. Thank you.
yeah, exactly. And I was like, again, like I was in tears leaving that appointment. And then the doctor that called me a hypochondriac, again, I was in tears leaving that appointment. And she'd always also said, you're going to be on disability for the rest of your life. But then I picked myself up and I was just like, what are my options, right? I can either just accept that they're right, but I don't. I don't accept that's correct. And maybe it's just as well my personality. I didn't know this until I moved to Canada as well. I started with this company and they wanted to assess all our personalities. And I always felt like I was a bit in the wrong job a little bit. I kind of went into science because my mum and dad said, you should go into science. But I was much more artistic at the time at school. Anyway, we did this Myers-Briggs test, which is just a personality assessment. And then we put everyone's names on this board. And I was in a little box on my own and no one else had my personality. And I was like this slightly introvert, sensing, feeling, perceiving kind of person. And it's like this sensing, feeling, just that listening to your inner voice. So whereas everyone else is like this judging, thinking kind of character. So there I was on my own thinking, that makes kind of sense. That's why I kind of feel I'm in the wrong job here. So that's how I think I stuck to my guns. It's just like part of my personality. And this whole chronic illness journey, I just learned so much about myself that I wouldn't have ever gone down that rabbit hole before. I didn't spend much time thinking about who am I or why am I here. I was just one of these people, happy-go-lucky, just enjoying life, camping on the weekends. I learned to teach yoga, so I was teaching through the week and then partying a lot as well because I was in my 30s when I moved to Canada. So I was just living my life, really not really putting much thought into it. And then this happened. And so it was a good learning experience, although obviously it's not good to be ill. It's pretty devastating, but I come out the other end feeling like I'm a much nicer, better, more compassionate person, knowing a lot more about myself.
I would not wish autoimmune on anyone, but what you just said is how I feel as well. Is it's very common what I hear from others who have come through the other side, and they may still be dealing with symptoms. We've talked about, would you want your old life back? And the majority of them have said, no, I've really grown. I've really found who I am. And a lot of them, such as yourself, actually found your calling.
Yeah.
So let's dive in a little bit about the moment when you realized that you were on a new path and had found your calling.
I'd always realized ever since I'd moved to where I live now in Vancouver, there was this nutrition school, which is like a block away from where I live. And I was always curious, thinking I'd love to do that, but I just never really had the time and it wasn't a priority. I was busy with work. It was a very busy job. I had multiple roles in this job. Like I was teaching students, I was doing lots of different experiments, I was working late, I was going to meetings, I was presenting at international meetings. It was very busy, multitasking, stressful. It was fine at the time because I was healthy. But then when I got sick and eventually got back to work, I was still struggling with the job because it was so complex. And it was grant funded, the research that I was doing, and they needed to lay someone off. So I was like, I'll take it, lay me off. That was it. I just knew that was the right time. Again, it was like that inner sense. If I go now, I'll get this severance package and then I can study and become a nutritionist. And I just knew that's what I wanted to do, even though it was a little scary leaving a very secure job with a lot of health benefits that I used a lot at the time. And I was going to be leaving all that behind to go to a much less well paid, no benefits. But I just knew that was what I wanted to do. And I think doing that actually helped me then recover even more because I got back to work, but I wasn't quite right. And I think finding a purpose and having a more joyful life and taking out all that stress of that 9 till whatever time it was work schedule just I think really helped turn things around. It was one of the major things. There were like 5 or 6 major things that I did that I think were very instrumental into my recovery.
Yeah. Well, bravo. Jumping without a net is a little scary, real scary. But
yeah. Although I have to say, kudos to my husband who he stuck by me. And it wasn't like I didn't have help. Like he was like paying the bills and things like that. So, although I did have like this a little bit of money packed the severance, but he's been incredibly supportive. He's been amazing. I'm very lucky because not everyone has that.
Absolutely. I do want to applaud you for listening to your inner voice about who you really are and where you really should be. And listening to that so many times. And you alluded to it a little bit of that excuse making, like, oh, well, I studied for this, or I've been here so long, or it's all these other excuses we can make before we're willing to say, okay, what got me here isn't working for whatever reason. And taking the time to do some introspection on, okay, what got me here isn't working. What do I want instead? It's kind of easy to look backwards and go, okay, yeah, I don't want that. Scary part's looking about, oh, what do I want?
I think this whole experience helped me to find that out, of course, when I started researching. And it was the experience of being gaslit and treated so badly. The medical system in terms of, and it's not like they do it deliberate, but it was just like you go from doctor to doctor, disappointment after disappointment, and they give you all these tests or procedures that are invasive. And it's just, there's just so many women out there that are experiencing this as well, that I just wanted to share. You can take this power, this knowledge, and you can actually do a lot for yourself, that you can just go with it, basically. It doesn't have to be this way. I think it's our medical care system that's at fault, not so much the doctors, right? They're just doing what they've been taught.
Well, they're doing what they've been taught and they don't know the history. And I noticed with myself, after a while, I was becoming frustrated and I had to be very careful of like modulating myself. Like this new doctor, don't be frustrated with them, you know. But it was a frustration of how many places I'd been and been told everything from it's in your head, it's anxiety, you're working too hard, why don't you, you know, you have burnout. All these things that I just knew in my truth wasn't what was happening. There was something else more going on. And yet I was working hard not to be frustrated. And I'm sure the doctors were frustrated with me that I just met them and I'm already frustrated. So it kind of became this ball rolling downhill. And,
Yeah.
and then getting tired of the labels, the easy labels, somebody who just meets you and gives you 10 minutes and they just slap burnout, anxiety, whatever label on you and assume that that's good without realizing maybe you were told that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 years ago, and you're like, okay, I tried that road. That's not it. There is something else going on. And that's the hard part, is to continue to advocate for yourself. You know,
Yeah.
when you're feeling crummy, advocating for yourself is not the easiest thing to do.
It's not, it's really hard. And of course, when you're feeling crummy, you're much more emotional. It was really tricky. In fact, one of my doctors, she got rid of me as a patient. She
Oh,
just
I've
didn't
been
want me as
fired too, but that's a
yeah, I didn't
badge
want
of
to say
honor.
fired, but yeah, she fired me. Again, I felt terrible when she did that. But she also wanted to counsel me, and it didn't feel right. And she was the one that was saying, well, we're all tired. And I just didn't feel like she was the right fit. But it's actually really hard to get a doctor here. So you're kind of stuck with who you've got, right? And anyway, she fired me. So it forced me then to get this other doctor who was the one that she was pretty good with the prescriptions. She also prescribed for me like some thyroid, because I think when we're inflamed, our hormones really suffer. And my thyroid was normal, but I asked for it, she's sure. So I was really grateful. She gave me some thyroid med and it really helped. Things like that. But yeah, it is hard to advocate for yourself. And you think you're going crazy. You're like, is it me? Or are these people all right? They're all well educated. And is it me that's wrong? But I just felt inside, no, I know, I know what's going on. Why is everything so hard to get good treatment here?
And to keep your voice, for me, I had reached that stage that I'd been to enough places or enough doctors. No, I was not doctor shopping. I was trying to find the answer. And yet
Yeah,
I had to work so hard to modulate my voice, not to sound frustrated with wherever I was, because it
yeah,
wasn't their fault that I was frustrated. It was all the other years of trying to figure out what was going on and knowing
yeah,
in deep inside me that it wasn't all in my head. I'm so tired of that phrase. It's just
yeah.
absolutely awful phrase.
I know. And I had the same thing. It's in your head, you're stressed, take this antidepressant. And it's just like, no, that's not the answer. And they did send me off to this big group. It was just to talk to a psychologist. And to go there, it was like this unlabeled, dismal looking building. And I walked in and it was this massive room and it was really full of like 100 people sat in a giant circle. And I'm just like, wow, look at all these depressed people who need a psychologist. And then I went into a separate room where they interviewed me, and there was a young student boy there in the interview too. So that was a little bit embarrassing, having to unload all my stuff, personal stuff, in front of this young boy. And I was like kind of crying because I was all emotional. I was all over the place at the time because my brain was inflamed. And that was one of my main symptoms, along with all the body stuff. And at the end of the interview, they're like, oh, yeah, you're not suitable for this program. And then I'm like, oh, okay.
I flunked out of being depressed. Now I'm
Yeah,
depressed.
and it's like I told the doctor this wasn't what I wanted or needed, and of course they confirmed that, and it's just like, and then you're just wasting so much time going from appointment to appointment, like it's like a full-time job trying to get to all these appointments, right? My husband's in work with the car, so I'm having to take public transport everywhere as well. So it was very depressing, just that whole thing of like just going to doctors to doctors to doctors, trying to find an answer, and just never happening because they're all just so separate and different. And then you get there and you're so complicated, they just don't really know what to do with you.
And I want to circle back on something you said about the young student, male student listening in on you. I've had that happen to me numerous times where, and I wanted to be nice. I'll put in air quotes. I wanted to be nice. And so I said, okay. I was
Yeah,
so uncomfortable during those times. Just recently, I said, no, I'm not comfortable. And you know what? The world didn't stop.
great. Yeah. And I would do that now because back
Yes,
then I
I
hadn't
said, you
learned
know,
to advocate for myself,
yeah, if you're not comfortable, say so. I was
Yeah.
like, so many times I was either not telling the full story I would tell if I was alone with this medical professional or
Yeah.
whatever. And this time when I said, no, I'm not comfortable, it was like,
Good.
oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Good for you. And you don't need to feel guilty about it, right? It's your right. And at that time, I was feeling very vulnerable and emotional, and I hadn't really learned to speak out. And but at the same time, also as someone who teaches students in the labs, I'm like, well, he's got to learn somehow, right? So I'm making all these excuses for them when really I should be just taking care of myself and my priorities and not worrying about other people. And that's what women do, right? We worry about everyone else and not ourselves most of the time. So it's totally changing how you go through life and what you've been taught as a woman, and to really put yourself first. And that can be really hard for women to do, I think. And I see it in my clients.
I see it a lot too. And the one thing I like to talk about is, look, if you're sick and to the point where you're not even able to get out of bed, how are you able to help your family from that place?
Yeah.
It's important to put your health first, because if
Yeah.
you're not healthy, you're not helpful to anyone else. So I don't see anything selfish about taking the time to discover what's going on with you and putting in the time and energy to get well. That's
Yeah.
when your family and your friends and everyone, that's what they want. They might say, get up, mom, I need my sandwich. And you're 15, make it yourself.
Good to educate them to make their own sandwiches and whatever else they need to do, right?
Right, give them some life skills. So
Yeah.
now, I want to jump ahead because you did go to nutrition school and it radically changed your life.
It
So
did. It did.
let's
Yeah.
talk about you got the courage to go to nutrition school. Then what happened?
Well, the experience itself was brilliant. I was probably the oldest person in the class, but that was fine. And I was maybe a bit odd compared to most people with some of the things that I would come up with. But I managed to make a few really great friends. I'm still friends with them now. They're all one woman was like a little bit younger than me, but most of them were like in their 20s and 30s when I met them. And I was like, I don't know, was I like 48 or something like that at the time? And they're just really wonderful friends. And this itself just brought so much joy into my life, just making new friends. I mean, I already had some friends. This was just another layer of happiness to meet these wonderful people.
Meeting people in a different environment are different than
Yeah,
your current friends, and there's something exhilarating about not only
yeah,
meeting new people, but also learning new stuff. And you guys are
yeah,
learning new stuff together.
exactly. Like we all could all geek out together on the nutrition stuff. And I was teaching them how to do coffee enemas. And all of them tried it and they liked it. When you put your hand up in class and talk about it, people are like, ooh, what are you talking about? And I think I was one of the first people to start talking about mast cell activation and histamine issues in the class. Now that over the last few years has become more common, but that was like new to people, even the instructors back then, like 7, 8 years ago.
I'm still
So
surprised, though, how many people and medical professional people, I'm not saying just the general public because I don't expect them to be aware of it, but
mhm,
how many medical professionals are not aware of it? Or when you put it on a form, they're like, what's that? And then you say it, and, oh, that's not real. That is so frustrating to me about just because you haven't heard about it
yeah.
or read about it doesn't mean it's not real.
Well, the funny thing is, my doctor had heard of it. And she's like, I know someone you can go and see. She sent me to this dietitian that specialized in histamine. And she basically, the woman just gave me a handout of low histamine foods and sent me home. I was like, all right, again, another wasted trip, more disappointment and frustration because it's like, well, I can just look that up online. I already know this. So Yeah. Anyway, that's just an aside there. But
Let's go down a little rabbit hole for a second because, I'm working through mast cell activation syndrome myself. Let's describe what mast cell activation is. We have a few shows from other experts on, just so people know where we're talking about with mast cell. Just describe a little bit about what it is, and then we can jump forward into some more of your amazing journey.
it's when your mast cells, they can get more easily triggered, let's say, and your mast cells are these immune cells that are all over the body. They're on all our tissues and organs that lining the digestive tract. They're so important. And if they get triggered, sometimes we want them to be triggered. If there's something where we need a little bit of inflammation, we need to clear it up. But if they're like overly sensitive, they're going to be pumping out all these inflammatory molecules like prostaglandins, leukotrienes, histamine. So histamine is kind of the main one that everyone talks about. And we get all kinds of weird and wonderful symptoms. And it can be very different for different people, what kind of symptoms they get. But you can get like these nasally symptoms, these asthma symptoms, you can get brain fog, you can get heart palpitations, you can get skin rashes, you can get digestive issues and pain, you can get joint pain, fatigue, like the list goes on and on. So if you're having this overstimulation of your mast cells, or they're too easily triggered, and there's a few different reasons as to how this happens, you can be in a lot of pain and suffering. So I think, is there anything you want to add to that, Sharon?
I think the thing is that they're all generalized symptoms, and the problem with mast cell activation is a lot of doctors either A, haven't heard of it, don't know enough about it, or dismiss it altogether. And for me, understanding and doing research, if you've listened to some of the symptoms Kim mentioned and you've been told it's all in your head or something, go read about mast cell. It's MAST, mast cell activation syndrome, also known as MCAS, MCAS. And it's important because when I found out that really the majority of my symptoms were mast cell activation syndrome, my whole world changed. That's when the healing accelerated. And because it is treatable and there are things you can do to mitigate it, help it along, and get greater health. But the symptoms of it are so common with so many other things. And a lot of people don't take into account I like to think it of as part immune system, part allergy system. In my mind, that's kind of how I think about it. And when we hear about histamines, I never knew how all the inflammation that they can cause in a body. And so to me, that was one of those aha moments where a lot of radical, quick healing happened when someone finally said, I think you've got mast cell activation syndrome. Let's try it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. It was an aha moment for me. And I burst into tears because I was like, why has no one told me about this? I discovered it myself. And I'm like, oh my God, that's all my symptoms right there. And mine got worse after taking antibiotics for a parasite that I'd been diagnosed with, called Blastocystis hominis. And it was resistant. So I took a few rounds of these antibiotics. And it was at the time when I was very much into conventional medicine. So I thought antibiotics would be good, but they didn't. And then all these symptoms got worse. And I probably already had it, but like a much lower level. It was probably to do with hormone imbalance. I've got these poor detox pathways. I was probably back then eating a high histamine diet, probably exposed to lots of toxins, working in a lab. So all these things, they put pressure on these mast cells, and things started to show. You have this, like, they call it a bucket, where, you can tolerate so much stuff and you can release or produce so much histamine. But when your histamine bucket gets full, things start to overflow. And that's when all these symptoms happen. My bucket was overflowing at this point, and the antibiotics, I tipped it right over the edge. When I found out about histamine intolerance or mast cell activation disorder, they're a little bit different, but the histamine is part of both of those issues. I was like absolutely flabbergasted and just like, why hasn't anyone mentioned this? Of course, like you said, the doctors don't know about it.
I like to think of it as that bucket, and then all of a sudden, for me, it was like the bucket didn't overflow; it like fireworks
exploded.
It exploded. It wasn't a gentle overflowing. So there's a whole range of symptoms if you're thinking along here, listening
Yeah.
to some of these varied symptoms that could be any number of things. I had a doctor years ago tell me about the problem with a lot of diagnosing, especially in an autoimmune category, is so many of the symptoms run in the same like stream bed, the little river bed, and they all like fatigue and brain fog, all sort of match up with a lot of diagnoses.
Yeah.
Not until you get one or two symptoms that pops it out. In my case, it was severe skin rashes, that they could put a label on it. For years, I just had this low level, annoying river of
Hmm.
ill health that I just fought my way, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing through. And it wasn't until the skin rashes that somebody said, oh, okay, now we can put a label on it. And I feel that way about mast cell activation syndrome. A lot of the things we've said, or disorder, or histamine intolerance, they're very similar in symptoms. Until you put some label on it, then it's like, okay, now I've got it.
And it made the most sense to me when I discovered it because, like you're talking about labels, like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, like what is it? It's just a label, and they don't really know what it is. At least with mast cell activation, like you've got something to target. And like you, when I started working to reduce histamine, high histamine foods and stuff like that, I felt so much better. Like it made a huge difference. So that was a big one for me. And I later then discovered that I have a genetic variation where I don't make a lot of the enzyme that breaks down histamine in the gut. So then that is probably one of the reasons I got sicker than maybe someone else might. But, obviously taking rounds of antibiotics really didn't help. And I wish like I could go back and undo that, but it is what it is.
Although
Yeah.
the lovely thing about our gut, once we start loving it and treating it with kindness and the right nutrients,
Yes.
it takes a while. Once your garden's got weeds, it takes a while to replenish it.
Yes.
I love the thing with what you're doing now with nutrition and helping clients understand how diet and lifestyle really do play a bigger part in our wellness journey than most people give it credit for. They give it a lot of lip service, but let's be honest, it does take a commitment and some work to
It
really
really
change your
does.
life.
Yeah, it really does. And for me too, it took me years to really change my diet because I couldn't believe how many foods I was actually reacting to because it wasn't just histamine. It was gluten, it was lectins, it was oxalates, right? All these things are in different foods. And so I had to kind of lower all of these things. And I'm still on a moderate to low histamine, lectin, oxalate diet, but you can actually have quite a really nice diet, but it's just committing to it. And it can be hard to make those changes because the foods we enjoy, there's so much more to it than just it tastes good. There's the social part of it, it's cultural. There's all these layers to why we eat the foods we eat. So there's lots of challenges to changing the diet. It can be done bit by bit. If I went back to my old diet now, I immediately get sick. Or if I eat like the wrong food, I might get a bit of brain fog. So I still have to be careful. I'm still working on healing my gut, but compared to how it was, it's so much better. I don't have to be super strict anymore. I went through a point where I just didn't drink any alcohol whatsoever for years. And that's for someone from Britain, it's a very alcohol based culture. That's quite a rare thing. I have a gin and tonic now. And, I can just have lots of normal things as opposed to being really strict. But to heal the gut, you do need to be a little bit strict to allow the gut to heal. And then you can start to add things back in and see how much you can tolerate them.
And it's
And
not always easy, as you were mentioning. I was thinking about the time family member loves toast and their gut tolerates toast.
yeah,
Mine does not. But the smell, it's like, oh, that is so unfair. If I'm here and you're here, you're not allowed to make toast. Sorry. It's just the way it is.
I know
You
how you
got to
feel.
support me on that. As you said, eating's an emotional thing too. I
Yeah,
came from a generation of women in my families, grandmas, aunties, etc. Here, have a cookie, you'll feel better.
yeah,
A
me too.
little no, now, cookies
Yeah,
make me feel worse.
yeah,
It's still in there in the emotional part of my brain. Like, here, have a cookie, you'll feel better.
Yeah, well, my mum, she was always like baking and making us treats, and it's like a sign of love, right? So got that attachment, and I love to do the same. I figured out ways to bake that are healthy or healthier and don't have any grains in them. I could always share some recipes with your listeners if they're interested.
Oh, that would be fun. We might have to do a cooking show. That's
Right.
Jim.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, community, we'll put that on the little marker there. Do a cooking show. So, talk about how did you find out which foods were on the not now list?
It was a slow process, but it's mostly research. It started before I knew I had histamine issues. It kind of started with one of my friends. I was probably like saying to her, "Oh, I don't feel good." And she's like, "You could have a gluten issue, right?" So I was started looking into that. And then it was just cut out gluten, but I was still sick. So I came across this woman online called Paleo Mom, and she was like at the forefront of leaky gut back then. Like no one was talking about leaky gut except for her, or intestinal permeability. Now it's all in the research. Wasn't a lot of it back then. But then I'm like, well, maybe I've got this. I started cutting out some other foods like the grains, and that kind of helped a bit, but I was still getting sick. I started making treats out of nuts and seeds, but they weren't really agreeing with me either. I'm like, how can I be reacting to all these healthy foods? And then I discovered oxalates and histamine kind of around the same time. And so I started lowering those. And then I was still getting a little bit sick. So I lowered lectins. And then that was the ticket, right? So I didn't have to eliminate everything completely, but I just had to be mindful of where's my histamine bucket today? How many oxalates am I eating? And it just went from there. And it just took years because my illness spanned kind of over 10 years. So it was like this slow downhill trajectory, say for about 5 years. And then it took me about 5 years then to get back up to feeling better.
I love how the body does respond when we treat it with what I call the space and grace we'd give our friends, that we should give ourselves too. And the surprising thing to me as I learned about foods and nutrition for me was like so many foods that I'll say the authorities say are healthy.
Yeah.
Spinach is high in oxalates. And if
Yeah.
oxalates don't bother you, great. But for some of us where we're oxalate sensitive, spinach can really send us in a spiral. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting. Food is so personalized. And I get really annoyed with people when like they say something about you're not eating enough of XYZ. And yet, okay, well, that gives me brain fog or that upsets my tummy or whatever. It's like, let it go, let it go.
Yeah.
Although I do
Yeah.
worry sometimes, though, because I know I was there for a while. As I first dove into this, and I know you help people with this, when I first dove into this, I was down to like 5 or 6 foods.
Wow.
That's because all I knew, I was doing it on my own, and I know you help people through this, is that, okay, take out the lectins. Okay, check. Take out the nightshades. Check. Take out the oxalates. And pretty soon I'm like, okay, what can I eat? And like, so we're just
Yeah.
up to the last 10 minutes or so. Talk about what you're doing now.
I'm kind of more word of mouth because I'm a bit kind of rubbish at social media. I just prefer to be out hiking than sat at the computer.
I'm with you there, Kim.
Yeah. So if you look at my Facebook and Instagram, you'll be disappointed. But you can go to my website and it has some info on there. I work with clients and I help them with all kinds of things like mind body stuff. I help with obviously with diet, trying to figure out the right diet for them, which works for them because I don't want them to eliminate too many foods. So it's a little bit trial and error. I work really closely with them. I get them to do food diaries, which can be really helpful and try and see if there's certain foods triggering them. But I also work with like more energy as well. I'm very much into frequency, whatever that can be. It could be using a tuning fork, right? Or it could be listening to a binaural beat, or it could be using a red light device, a red near infrared light device, or a sauna, or a pulse electromagnetic field mat, or a device that also has the same wavelength. So there's all these different things out there that can support us on a foundational level. And I find that when you give the body this sort of foundational support, it has more energy then to deal with all the other stuff going on. It can actually help us to heal, even though we're not specifically targeting anything. So that's how I work with people. I do try and go down the rabbit hole sometimes as well if they've got some specific things. Or if they've been put on a medication, I'll help educate them around that medication and how best to take it in terms of, is it depleting nutrients, or what are the side effects? Or, it's my thought on this one. There's a lot of misinformation out there, especially on things like statins, for instance. So I like to educate. I mean, I never tell people what to do because that's not my realm. That's for the doctors. At least I can educate people and help guide them on their way so they can make the right decisions for themselves.
I want to circle back around because I have a question. What's binaural beats?
Oh yeah, binaural beats.
And I'm assuming it's not the food, so go ahead.
No. So there's lots of these on YouTube. If you just Google binaural beats, people have created these specific frequencies that they're slightly different. It's two frequencies and there's a slight difference between them. And that difference, you have to listen to them with headphones. And that difference in each ear sends a shift through the brain, that frequency through the brain that can be healing and calming, depending on the frequencies they're using. So it could just be some kind of monotone kind of sounds going like, boo. Or it could be like they put a musical composition together with a few of these notes in, and it can be quite pleasant to listen to.
I'm curious. It reminds me of Dr. Porter's Safe and Sound protocol. How are they different?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what his protocol does. I think he does use some sound therapy, but I don't know if it's binaural beats. I think they also have, each person gets someone they can counsel with and things like that as well. I'm not sure. Do you know much about his protocol?
I've been through it.
So, okay. Yeah.
And you do have headphones and you do have music that has indistinguishable tones every so often going through, as well as music you're familiar with, whether it's classical or pop or rock or whatever, specific changes to the musical tones. So it sounded really fascinating to me. Well, we're just about down to the last few minutes. What would you like to share with people that I haven't thought to ask you?
Gosh, just do things that bring you joy if you can. Do as much of that because that's so important. Like how we experience our lives creates a chemistry in our body. And that is a powerful chemistry. If we're trying to be joyful or having gratitude, or at least trying not to get so caught up in all the negative things that can be really, I understand it can be really overwhelming. If you just look for some positive things that, to reach for as much as or as best as you can, that would be like a really important thing to do, I would say.
I just want to add to that know what's yours and what's not yours. Just let go what's not yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a destroyer of joy. And don't let anyone destroy your joy. I have acquaintances in my life that may not enjoy what I find enjoyable, and so that's fine. They can just do whatever they want to do, but please, I set boundaries. Don't destroy my joy.
Yeah, exactly. Good for you. And that's it. Also speak up for yourself, like Sharon and like I do now, because I used to be such a yes person to everyone. If someone is doing something and I'm like, hey, that's like a little bit inconsiderate, instead of holding it in, I'll just tell them and then they won't do it again. So I'm much more open about speaking my mind in a kind way. Like you can do it all nicely and just doing what I want, or just being open with people and doing what's right for me.
And disengage with those who don't respect when you say no. I think too often we feel like have to make excuses for us saying no or whatever. And just because you don't want to do it is a perfect excuse. You don't have to like, oh, I'm sorry, I've got an appointment. No, you can just say no. It's fine to say no.
Yeah, it's so good to do that. It's very freeing. And then also just listen to your body. Say you've made an appointment to see someone, like a friend or whatever, and suddenly you're feeling sick. Well, they're going to understand if you can't make it. And normally they're like, that's fine. In fact, it's better. I didn't really want to do it today anyway, because something came up and things normally work out. So also just not forcing yourself to do things if something changes and you're just like, oh, I wish I hadn't agreed to that now. Just tell people it's fine and just say, look, this has come up and I'm just not into it today. And people, if they love you, they will be understanding. Yeah.
And if they're not understanding, that's fine too.
Yeah.
You just find someone else who is understanding.
Exactly.
Sometimes when I have those moments where it's a strong no, and I used to, like you, say yes, and then
Mm,
I would be so beating myself up for who knows long, like, why did I do that? Oh, I should, you know, that is not good for your health either. So
no.
I didn't think I'd go off on this rabbit hole of saying no, but no is one of the kindest things you can do because when I have said yes, but it's really a no, I go in and I'm not giving it my 100% for whatever reason. I might think I am, or I might think, oh, well, I was really nice there. And yet you might hear later, like, were you feeling okay or whatever?
Yeah.
Sometimes the nicest thing you can do is say no.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But all parties, and it's not a bad word, and I don't know why it's got this negativity around it. So yeah, we need to change that.
Oh, because some
Yeah,
people think it inconveniences them, and so it must be a bad word when you have to be inconvenienced, but they don't.
right.
That's my view of it. Oh my gosh. Can you give us your website so people can find out more about you?
It's www.vivovibrant.health.com. That's spelled VIVO vibranthealth.com. Or alternatively, kimtalbot.ca is also, it's not my official website, but you can find me there too. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Just be persistent, be tenacious, don't give up. Because if you give up, then you're just going to stay where you are, and it may take years, but just keep the hope alive, right? I didn't think I'd ever get better, and I did, and now I'm almost 100% better, like hiking up really big mountains again, and my energy level's great every day. I'm happy every day. It's still, like I say, I have to be careful what I eat still, but generally, I'd say I'm better than I ever was, to be honest. So yeah, just don't give up because you can make really big changes to your health with holistic methods and diet changes and things like that. It's just keep an open mind. I think that is really key. If I come across a couple of types of people, it's very simplified to like fixed mindset and an open mindset. But you can really see people falling into those categories. And I'm a very open-minded person. So I tried everything that came across, and much to the annoyance of my husband, who's more of a fixed mindset, and we had a few arguments about that. But that's another story. Some of those things that people would be like, "That's so woo-woo," they actually helped a lot. So keep an open mind, and if it feels right for you, pursue it and try it.
I think trust yourself is the critical part there.
Yeah,
You know you best and
trust yourself. Yeah,
trust yourself. And
that's so key, actually.
yeah, if it's a no, it's a no. If it's a yes, it's
Yeah,
a yes. And sometimes it's been a maybe, and I have to go in with an open mind, and it can turn into a yes or a no when it's a maybe.
yeah,
But I've tried it, right? I'm like, well, I don't know. Let's give it a go and give it a good old try. And then you can say yes or no.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's just that word, trust yourself. Like it's so key. It's something that I didn't do. I wasn't really trusting myself when I was sick because you just doubt everything. I remember going to this yoga nidra workshop, and we had to put on a piece of paper and hand it in something about ourselves. And then they shared them all at the end. They didn't say who wrote what, but most of the women in that workshop, of course, it was for women, and they all wrote
Of
things
course,
like,
that's usually how it is.
yeah, they wrote things like, I'm not good enough. And mine was like, I don't trust myself because my body was falling apart. I was getting gaslit by everyone I knew, including the doctors. And you just think you're going crazy. So yeah, trust yourself. It's just so important.
Sometimes people say, oh, Sharon, trust yourself sounds so easy. I can say it easily, right? Just trust yourself. It takes some time. Sometimes it's takes some time to get back into touch with who you are and what you trust and
Yeah,
how you trust your body. For a while, I would use the word, I don't like to say it out loud anymore, but I need to say it for here, like betrayed. And it never
yeah,
really did. It was sending me messages I just didn't understand. And
yeah,
no one else could help me understand what those messages were. But it wasn't a betrayal, but it took me sitting with myself to come to terms with that and letting those words go and coming and realizing, no, it's just speaking a different language and you have to sit still and listen. What is the language it's trying to talk to you? Because the body doesn't use language, the words. It uses other messages for us to understand. And I think that's critically important, is to give yourself time and space and grace you would your best friend.
Exactly. It's important to listen and take your time with it. And our body it's just trying to tell us there's something wrong. And maybe if we just sit with it, something will come and we're like, aha, and just listen to your gut feeling. That's, I think, important.
Too often our brain talks our gut out of it.
Exactly, it does. They're always in this struggle, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kim, we're out of time. It's been fantastic. And thank you so much. And I'm going to take you up on that. We'll do a cooking show soon.
Okay, sounds good.
So,
I'd love to share some recipes.
get working on a couple of recipes there. We'll figure out when works for us to do a little cooking show with Sharon and Kim.
Sounds good.
That sounds fun. So everyone, that's Kim Talbot. Her URL will be down in the description. And thank you so much for sharing your courageous journey to wellness. It's really appreciated. Sometimes when I was first starting out, it was so nice to hear someone saying, just keep it up. You'll get there too. You'll get there too. So everyone, have a great week, whatever your adventures, and join me next week for another brand new episode. Enjoy.